Let's take a short break with a homegrown uplifting track. This is Be Who You Wanna Be from Newcastle band Never Say Never Music.
Be who you wanna be.
This is for the struggle. This is for the hustle.
Be who you wanna be.
This is for the struggle. Come on, use that muscle.
Check out Be Who You Wanna Be and more from Never Say Never Music on your favourite streaming platform or visit neversaynevermusic.com.
Bring it back.
It's been many generations, I think, since we sort of were living in this idea of, well, going through that tough pain is well worth it. We sort of deep down know that idea, don't we? I mean, we sort of even get it from immunology and things like that, that we can build up in our own system an immunity to things. You know, we want the kids to sort of play in the dirt a bit. We think they're going to build up an immunity. But so often in our current culture, we just try and run away from something like suffering, something that's going to hurt us and grow into us. What does deep suffering actually bring us? That's a question that Dr. Katherine Thompson knows personally. He's going to address and chat to us today as well. This is the Towards Understanding podcast. It's wonderful to be with you. Please like, rate, review, share this with as many people as you can. It helps us get it out to more people as well. Let's get stuck into this conversation with Katherine. It's wonderful to have you in the studio with us, Katherine.
Yeah, great to be here, Clayton.
Now, the book itself, The Discipline of Suffering, I'm guessing there's not too many people going around who's like, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to write about suffering. And then on top of that, how, you know, the strength and the goodness of that out of it. I'm guessing there's not too many other books that are quite like yours. Or am I wrong? Is there actually a lot of books around suffering that are out there?
I think what you've nailed there is that the title is meant to really get under your skin, because when you use the word discipline in our culture, no one likes it and they tend to run away. And I think I tried to capture something there, that it's a choice about our attitude that we bring to pain and suffering, which our culture tends to run away from.
Yeah.
So it's a choice to go towards it.
Yeah. Now, we want to talk about a whole lot of different parts of it. I want to talk about the discipline part. I want to talk about the suffering part. I want to talk about a bit of your personal journey and that, and also part of the faith aspects of it. Before we sort of do that, and it might touch a little bit on it, I get it. Why for you even write a book about this in the first place?
There's a couple of different reasons. One of the things that formed who I am as a person is the fact that I had pain when I was a teenager, and I've had a lot of operations. Now I'm older, sadly more, and I have chronic pain issue because my joints don't work, and I've had 2 spinal fusions. So that is part of it. So suffering is just normal for me. But the other part of it is that I guess I grew up in the church, and a lot of people talk about things like sin and forgiveness and things like that. And I didn't really connect to God that way. I connected via identifying with Jesus suffering on the cross and him understanding what I'm going through, which I guess is different. And I think that people my age and younger tend to relate a bit more to Jesus Christ that way than talking about things about sin.
Yeah. My mate, one of my best mate, has got chronic pain, and for him, it's been very even recent understandings of saying, "Hey, I need to not try and just not deal with the pain or wait to get over the pain, but actually live with it, right? And live alongside it and be okay with it." And you know, there's lots of different things he has to go through from a spiritual perspective and mental and emotional and all sorts of things, and sometimes just have really bad days. And that's okay too. Yeah, there's a lot in this, and everyone is different. But we all do experience some level of pain and suffering, but there is definitely different levels of that. Let's talk a little bit maybe about your faith journey first then. When was that something that was an important part, and you would say then a critical part of your world and life? How young were you in that regard?
Well, I started to get really unwell when I was 14. So I guess my formation of faith and my illness sort of ran parallel. Because when things go off track, and I couldn't even sit in a classroom at school And no one knew what was wrong with me to start with. And I lived in Tasmania where there wasn't lots of specialists to diagnose you properly. And so for me, it was relying on God to get through things. And I guess that was just something that I naturally went to. Part of it was my upbringing, but it was about my faith becoming my own and not just being something that someone told me about. Yeah.
So as you started thinking a bit around, okay, what does this mean to live? And as you said, living with chronic pain, you're living with joint pain, back pain, or all sorts of things, and these are now a part of life. When did you start asking those questions, and I suppose maybe even more than when, how did you start asking those questions around, well, how do I start juggling this? If I believe in this God who is loving and loves me and cares for me, then how am I supposed to live with this aspect of it? When and what sort of questions did you start asking?
Yeah, I guess they're that's an adult way of seeing it. I don't know if teenagers see it that way. So remembering that I was a teenager and you're in that phase of trying to work out who you are and what you believe in. And I think that's where the key is, that it was about forming my character. And I'm very aware that I would have been a completely different person if I didn't have the health problems. And I'm not sure I would have liked me, to be honest.
That's interesting.
So there's a lot of things you learn because you can't do stuff.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Most, we maybe have all a similar perspective, but when you say character, what do you mean by that? The development of your character? Which parts of you is that?
Yeah.
What do you mean?
I can remember, and this is sort of not in the book at all, but I can remember having a moment when I was younger where I thought I could be quite selfish. But there's something about having to rely on God and being stretched beyond what you can cope with that makes you different. So it's about being patient, but patience is not about something you have or possess. It's something you do every day. So it's about your attitude that you wake up with every day, and it's about long suffering is another way of putting it. So it's a choice to lean into it rather than run away from it, I think. And in the New Testament, Paul talks about how suffering actually creates character, and there's something about perseverance and endurance that then changes us. Yeah.
So, the book is written, again, I liked your framing from the adult perspective rather than necessarily the child perspective. I think perhaps even if we're technically an age that everyone would say we're adults, sometimes there's childlike aspects of how we approach even topics like this. What has been the bigger, as you started talking about it and then you wrote about it, that you've noticed people find either awkward about this or confronting about it? Is there one particular area that most perhaps jars people or they just don't want to go near?
I think that our culture says that we have to be happy all the time. And I think that Western culture's in a crisis at the moment because that's not something you can ever live up to. And the therapy I teach as a therapist which is not necessarily based on Christian values, but you can certainly put it alongside Christian values, says that suffering's part of life. So it's about leaning into how you feel and facing your problems rather than running from them. And our Western culture tells us to run from them. And faith also is consistent with this approach where it's not about running away. Jesus talks about taking up your cross daily and following him. It's not about having an absence of problems in your life. It's about living despite them. So I think I'm really challenging our culture.
I like that. You've used a couple of times, and I want to push on those now as well, about the idea of running away and leaning in. My take on running away is perhaps we live in an escapism sort of style Western culture, or we live in a space of, materialism's going to get there or the next step's going to get there. So we keep sort of pushing for that. Am I sort of in the right space of what you mean by running away?
Yeah, so we even have this idea of the Australian dream, don't we? And that's why we keep talking about a housing crisis in our country. We think we should have these things. But I'm not so certain that that's what life's about.
And that does become pervasive, right? And beyond even just the sort of the zeitgeist or the culture itself, it actually becomes something internalized. I know certainly I've had to try and, as I've just been brought up in the culture of what Australia is, that says, well, actually, what do I really think about that? It does become sort of part of us, which is where it's very interesting to try and detach. When it's sort of a cultural conversation that someone else is having, it's easy to detach. But that's an interesting sort of fundamental aspect that seems to challenge our inner core if we're wanting to actually say, well, should I do tend to run away, or how do I lean in? So can we now talk about the leaning in? I feel like we're now getting a bit more to the discipline part of your discipline of suffering. But what do you mean by lean in to suffering or lean into pain?
Maybe I'll start with where I found it hard growing up, because I was right on the edge of postmodernism. So I very much think in a postmodern mindset. And for us, everything's been deconstructed. And for people my age and younger, we've had a crisis of faith, because we are like, but I don't understand that, or why should I agree with that? And then something will come up that's too hard to understand in your life, and then everything falls apart because no one's given you the tools to make sense of it. And I think that postmodernism's actually problematic in that it deconstructs but then doesn't give you any tools to repair. But our faith actually does give us tools to repair, and I would love that the church would actually say more in that space, because we talk so much about what's wrong but not how to then do something to heal, to move through it. And so for me, I think that's one of the things that I wanted to communicate. Yeah, nice.
We're going to come back in a few minutes, and I want to spend us a bit more time talking about what are some of those tools, what are some of the places to go, what are some of the communities we should be actually surrounding ourselves with, that sort of thing. So I'd like to talk a little bit more about that. So let's pin that one there, and we'll come back in a couple of minutes. The other aspects I want to sort of talk about is perhaps more examples as well. I'm sure that as you've written a book like this, as you've had conversations, others come and share with you. Do you find, and suffering's all different, right? You've talked about this chronic suffering for you of this certain pain. Someone else might have a different sort of suffering. It's still chronic for them. It's constantly with them. Someone else might have a traumatic moment where, okay, physically they're fine now, but mentally it's deep suffering. Are there things that are connected across, if we want to use that word, deep suffering? Are there things that are similar that you've been seeing, or is it literally a case of everyone is different and you can't sort of have a similar thread?
I do think that everyone's going to have a different thing they get stuck on. So you can have two people with the same problem, but one might breeze through it and the other gets stuck for some reason. So I think it's complicated. So it's not a one size fits all. But I think when I talk about problems and pain, it's not just about physical illness or people dying. It's other things, like what if your relationship breaks down, or what if something else happens to you, you lose your job, or you might be in a natural disaster, for example. These are all things we don't expect to happen, and that's why they're hard to get through, because they sort of dismantle and challenge what we thought our life was going to be, and sometimes challenge how we see meaning in life and how we see God, and how does it all fit together. Is the best place for somebody to go if they've got, and dealing with a suffering, dealing with an aspects of it, that actually finding our relationship with God is actually the first place to start, the ultimate best place to start? Now, it doesn't say suffering finishes. I'm not trying to pretend that at all, but that there can perhaps be more meaning to suffering at that starting point than anywhere else. I think the Bible's full of examples of people that hit a wall in their life and they're like, I don't know what to do. This is really a crappy situation. And like in the Psalms, the book of Job, there's a lot of, why is this happening? It's not fair. And then what my people that I talk to in my therapy room also complain about is then people don't listen to you properly. In our culture, sometimes people don't even want to talk about it. what do you do then? Because you're quite alone.
Yeah.
And it's interesting in the book of Job, Job's friends actually aren't helpful, and neither is his wife. She says, curse God and die, and I think that's pretty full on. And he's sort of left by himself to try and work it out. And I'm sad to say in our culture, a lot of the time people are left by themselves, or they get really hurt by people saying insensitive and things that stick in their mind, and they can't get past them, and it's really unhelpful. Yeah.
My guest is Katherine Thompson. She's the author of the book The Discipline of Suffering. We're going to be back continuing more conversations and talking about some of those tools as well that Katherine unpacks in this book, but also in lived experience and conversations with others as well. That's on the way next, here on Towards Understanding.
Share your brand, your event, your message.
Across 90 Christian radio stations and major cities in Australia and New Zealand.
By sponsoring Towards Understanding, hosted by Clayton Bielen.
More than 210,000 people tune into Towards Understanding each week. And with just one sponsorship, you'll reach this immense engaged audience. Find out more about this exciting and unique opportunity now
On the sponsorship page at positivemedia.com.au.
Something you talked about just before we went to our break before was around the idea that often people are not wanting to talk about suffering, and people find themselves alone in that regards. Is that because we feel like, we're just not tooled up to be able to talk about it? Or is it a deeper one of, actually, I don't want to get involved in this because I want to think about this myself? But perhaps both of those true. Is there other reasons you think that we're not wanting to engage with people with suffering enough?
Yeah, I think both of the reasons you just gave, because people are uncomfortable and don't know what to do. And so often when we give a pat answer like all things work together for good, it's because we don't want to deal with it. One of the things, especially because I work in the mental health space, with walking alongside people, which is, I think that's the model Jesus gives us, is to have a bigger conversation, not to be scared, and to actually sit with people. Don't feel like you need to say something, and just let them open up a conversation and be prepared to listen to their story. And there's something about, and this is quite a postmodern approach, but to talk about story and how we're experiencing our life and our faith, and being willing to sit in the mess together and then work through it together. And God is not scared of us being in a mess in our suffering. In fact, it's good to be angry sometimes. And then if you read the Psalms, people don't get stuck there. They actually move out of it and then get a bigger perspective, and then start to go back to, oh God, you are actually really powerful and you do care about me. And I guess that's what I want people to get out of the book, is that you don't need to be stuck in that place, but you do need to stay there a little while so that you can learn something, knowing that God's going to bring you out the other side if you persevere. Yeah.
And I mean, that's the in one sense, the stunning revelation for so much of culture. Actually, you might need to sit in this for a while.
Yeah.
And none of us want to, right? Like, no one wants to say, oh, great. And I don't think what you're trying to say is, hey, if you have an ability to get out of suffering, stay in it. Like, we're not saying that. But if that's where you are, there can be purpose in that too.
Yeah, and people actually go inward as a spiritual pathway for a while. It's a known thing in our Christian tradition. And I think that we've sort of forgotten about it because of where we are in our culture at the moment. But people have been writing about it for hundreds of years, that there is a rhythm to life where when you hit a wall and you get stuck with something, that it's actually quite normal and healthy to go inward, and you might need to reach out to other people and to a whole lot of things in order to do a bit of personal repair and transformation. And what St. John of the Cross says about that experience is that it's so dark, and yet something special happens, because when we're at the end of ourself, it's God's Spirit that comes into our life to do what we aren't able to do. And it can come via other people that believe in God, or it can come through something we read, or it can come through reading the Bible. It's so many different ways. I love to sit in nature, and that's where I connect to God, and I've always found that an easy place to be. So just being still for me is a great place to listen, and I learn so much that way. Yeah.
I think there is, and certainly in my own faith walk and my relationship with Jesus in the last few years has been a massive challenge around understanding not just the framework that I've been brought up in terms of this culture, right? Which, as you talked about, is we lived in such a capitalistic mindset culture. We've lived in such a Western postmodern culture. Actually, there's 2,000 years of Christian disciplines that people have talked about, and they've dealt a whole lot more with this than we have, and to go there. We said we'd talk about some of the tools, and you sort of mentioned them, even some there just now as well, for people who may be in suffering, and also for those who are dealing with somebody who is in suffering and how they can best help. Is there other tools that, and certainly you put plenty in the book too, but is there other tools that you could share with us now as well?
Our culture sort of relies on individualism, and I think that's a really big mistake and trap we fall into. I don't think when you're going through a tough time you can do it by yourself, and there is something about being in a community of people, and if you don't have one, well, it's time to reach out to people and not be scared to ask for help. Of course, you need to be discerning about who you talk to, because you don't want one of those unhelpful answers. But there's plenty of people out there, and even now I build my life that way. So I'm intentional. I have a mentor that's an older Christian that I meet up with. I have a spiritual director. I have a professional supervisor. I have my Christian friends, I have my church community, and I think it's not about one of those things, it's about all of those things, and then me actually taking time out every day to not just read the Bible, but to listen quietly to what God might be saying to me. So it requires us to slow down a bit, and to I limit my TV and media intake. Probably not the right thing to say on a radio station, but there's a time and place for it, because I definitely do listen to things actively, but we need to be discerning not to fill our mind up with stuff all the time. And I think that to go inward and to heal and allow God to speak into our life, if we're adventurous and willing to take that risk, we need to make space for it, otherwise we're not going to be able to do it.
I mean, there's an old adage / new understanding as well. We even say it to our kids that, who you hang around with is who you become, right? And that is so true. And certainly from a faith perspective, sometimes we're just not hanging around God enough. Actually the shaping can happen in that way. And likewise in community, the value of community and the value of the abrasiveness of community at times, as well as the love and embrace of community, it can help shape us in that sense too. I want to ask you a question, Katherine, which I'm not asking you to just give a certain answer, and you'll understand what I mean by that as I ask this. You had, as you said, you were very young and in chronic pain and suffering, and you've lived with that from then on. You've seen the benefit and you've seen the value of that. If God gave you the magic wand and said, I'm not going to let you go through any of that, there won't be any of the pain. There won't be so you're freed from that. What do you actually choose in that regard?
Oh, this is not a new question, because people have said, why don't you just ask God to heal you? For a very long time, because I'm actually 51 now, a very long time I used to look at them and stare blankly and think, why would you say that to me? Because I didn't see it as a bad thing, because I can see all the character shaping that's brought out of it. And it means that when I get out of bed every day, I rely on God for everything. So it's shaped all of those things, which I think other people would find it harder to learn, because they can just do stuff without thinking. So I think there's definitely that aspect to it. As I get older and my health challenges get a bit more complicated, I definitely have moments where I'm like Paul and say, can't you just get rid of the problem? Some days it just gets a bit overwhelming and too hard. when COVID happened, I was one of those unfortunate people that found they needed an operation and had to wait for a while. And I had 3 joint replacements in 2 years.
Wow.
And didn't know that was about to happen. And that was really hard, like mentally.
Yes.
Really hard to recover from. And I think that I had to readjust to the new normal. And there's a lot of fear, I think, that people, if I'm honest, people go through when things are hard in life. And that fear can take over your whole way of operating in the world.
Yeah.
You can move through that, though. It doesn't mean it's not going to keep sneaking back, but I think you get better at dealing with it. And I think it's good to name that it's hard, and these things are not all or nothing decisions, really.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think you hit that fear factor can hit so many different ways, and it's about acknowledging, helping. Community helps as well, right? To actually then refocus in that and push through, because it will come back. Living example here, over here on this side of the mic. That's going to keep coming back at you. Katherine, as we finish up, you talked about the reason you share this book. You want people to understand that bit more as well. So obviously, as people read the book, you're hoping that will help them. Is somebody who perhaps, and thinking of the 2 people right now, just your final sort of verbal message for them, someone who is going through some sort of suffering right now, what's your encouragement to them? And then likewise, somebody who is caring for somebody, and I'm not even meaning literally in the physical sense of having to be, but just, a deep personal connection to somebody who is suffering, how they can best bless and help them as well. So to those 2 people, what would you say?
Yeah, to the person suffering, the image I like to hold in my mind is Jesus. There's a story about him and his friends, Mary and Martha. And Martha goes around fretting about not having all her stuff under control and gets angry at her sister because she's not helping her. And Mary's busy listening to what Jesus is trying to teach. I find it really helpful to hold that image of Mary sitting at Jesus' feet listening. And that's what I've learnt you need to do when you suffer. And God will meet you in that place if you're willing to sit there and not flinch, because we tend to run away, don't we? If you're someone supporting someone that's suffering, I think don't be slow to speak and be quick just to listen and sit with them and try to travel with them. It is no good just to give them a meal for that week just because you thought, they're having a bad day. It's about the whole journey. So to keep following them up, make sure they're okay, and to journey with them, which is much harder in our culture when we're time poor.
Yeah. Katherine, thank you so much. Thank you for being willing to write this book. Thank you for the way you are approaching your suffering, which I think is an encouragement, an inspiration, perhaps more maybe is the better word, for others who may be going through that. And I'm sure for me as well, as I face something in the future that I'm sure will be tough, and things will be, whether it's long-term, short-term. And so thank you so much for the way that you embrace God in that way and share it with us. We thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Katherine Thompson is the author of the book, The Discipline of Suffering, here on Towards Understanding.
Let's take a short break with a homegrown uplifting track. This is Be Who You Wanna Be from Newcastle band Never Say Never Music.
Be who you wanna be.
This is for the struggle. This is for the hustle.
Be who you wanna be.
This is for the struggle. Come on, use that muscle.
Check out Be Who You Wanna Be and more from Never Say Never Music on your favourite streaming platform, or visit neversaynevermusic.com.
Bring it back.